Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it.
Well, Simon Reynolds is a interesting guy. Lovely chap, nice guest.
Brilliant. I tell you what's fascinating, that link yet again with sport and education and getting stuff. I think listeners will be another one that thinks, oh yeah, sport again.
And it was a bit of sport that actually gave him that focus that's run through his career.
Yeah.
And without that, you don't know what path he'd have been on and what he'd have done.
And also making definitive decisions. I think I think you said it, and it's that fact of it's quite easy just to stick with something because that's the momentum and inertia, and he did something to change that. I think it's a lesson.
But also him explaining as well, kind of that behind the scenes and under the bonnet of how important cash is. That cash is king.
Yeah.
And putting in place mechanisms to make sure that dental practices thrive, because I genuinely believe that's the future for dentistry.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be very interesting. One, his podcast, but how dentistry over the next 2 years is going to pan out.
Absolutely. So welcome to our latest episode of Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. And today we're delighted because we're joined by Simon Reynolds, who's the MD of Patient Plan Direct. How you doing, Simon?
Yeah, very well, thanks, guys. And yourself?
Yeah, very good. Nice to see you, Simon. Thanks for coming on. Lovely to see you again.
Yeah, we're doing well.
Thank you so much for inviting me on.
No, not at all.
Pleasure.
At all. Before we get into the whole Patient Plan Direct story and how that business is thriving post-COVID, could you tell us a bit about yourself, your childhood, your pathway into dentistry? How did you go from being a boy in shorts to a man in a suit?
But not today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Childhood. Wow. A little while back now. Still fresh-faced, but probably a little bit older than I look. So yeah, as a child, very sporty. Always loved to be outside.
Were you football or rugby?
Football. I think as per my frame, really, I think I'd have got destroyed on the rugby pitch. But golf really is my real passion, Chris.
Oh, wow.
And still is now. So I was a keen footballer when I was younger, bit of athletics, squash, etc. But I took up golf when I was about 14. If I'm honest, at school I was a little bit of wasn't the greatest at school, a little bit of a class clown, shall we say. But I firmly believe that getting into golf around 14 really sort of gave me a bit more structure to life and focus, and
almost a bit of discipline,
me get my
in
head
effect.
down. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I just sort of got my head down at the right time ahead of GCSEs.
What do you play off now?
I'm off 5 now.
Wow, that's a good golfer.
Wow, that's impressive.
Not playing with Simon. Okay, if he asks you for a round of golf.
When you say off 5 now, did you ever get to scratch?
I was so close. Yeah, so I started at 14, and when I was 18, I got down to 1, almost scratch.
Wow.
So in terms of being, I play incredibly badly.
Yeah.
But at what level is that? So you could have been professional.
Yeah, I was going to say, was there an option of pro or something?
No, I don't think so. And I know for a fact I was never good enough to be a pro. And I think you've got to be so good these days to be a playing pro at least. Maybe going into to be a club professional and coach, etc. Then possibly, but I think that's a tough career path these days. It's dead man's shoes a lot with I think getting professionals jobs in a golf club.
It's interesting what you say though about golf and sport and that giving you kind of focus, because there's a chap called Simon Monday who does a podcast, Life Lessons from Sport. And he looks at, he speaks to loads of people from the world of sport, but people from that aren't in sport, but perhaps support sports people. And the crossover from sport to business and sport to life in terms of how we manage ourselves and how we get on are just incredible. And it's interesting that in your own personal experience it was golf that gave you that structure, perhaps to be a bit more sensible in growing up.
So anyway, back to where we're golf 14.
Yeah,
do you go from there?
absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I think it just made me get my head down at the right time, education wise. Went through sixth form and then actually went on to study a degree called at the University of UCLan. Love that strapline. I went on to do a degree called Sports Technology, Golf Operations. So
Sports Technology, Golf Operations.
Exactly, Chris. Exactly. Yeah. What the hell's that?
Flip. Who knew there was a degree of that?
Yeah. So
Did that just basically mean that you could play golf for 3 years?
Essentially, yeah, and drink as well. I did that, and then asked that exact same question when I'd finished. I was like, well, what does that mean, and where's that going to take me next? So, stayed on and did a master's in finance, and then finished that. Still didn't know what to do. So, and the opportunity actually came up to do a PhD to carry forward my my master's degree dissertation topic, which was alternative budgeting mechanisms in corporate organisations.
Wow.
It's
that almost sounds like it could be a bedtime story read out on Calm.
Sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
So did you do your PhD?
I started my PhD and literally within a matter of, I think, 6 weeks, realised I'd made a huge mistake. I think I didn't know what to do, and I sort of naively assumed that, well, I thought another 3 years at university, brilliant, but very quickly realised that it was going to be very hard work and very independent work as well, sort of going in and doing your own research, writing papers, etc. I think it would have just, in terms of what I was doing, it had probably led me into academia, which I wasn't overly fussed on. It's a great path for some people. I don't think it was for me. So, I still stand by the decision that sometimes if it's not right, quitting early is a good
I
thing.
tell you what, Simon, that's impressive for the, in your words, class clown at 14 or something. So they'd end up with a master's in finance, because I can't imagine that was a stroll in the park either.
No, it wasn't. It was. I really enjoyed it though, and still do. I love numbers, I was really pleased I did that, but also really pleased I dropped out of the PhD and then scratched my head about what to do. Went and did a little bit of travelling, as I think a lot of people do, and then
worldwide, Europe-wide.
Europe predominantly, Europe, and I think that is the beauty of us being in the UK, is there's just so much on our doorstep. I did a lot of the interrailing scene, and
did you take your clubs?
I didn't actually. No, I didn't take my clubs.
Just wondered, there's lots of golf courses. I just thought it's a great social sport, isn't it?
I should have done, but thankfully I've been.
Did you do it on your own or with friends?
Up for that since. Just with my girlfriend at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, we went and did a bit of sightseeing, which was good fun. And then came back and was looking at a graduate scheme, and I think I wanted to be an accountant, so applied for all the obvious accountancy firms on their grad schemes, and didn't particularly get anywhere. And then there was a thing called the Shell Step Scheme, which was a 12-week program specifically for postgraduates, and I ended up going and doing a 12-week program with a company called First Capital Cashflow. I remember going to the interview. I had a look at their website, went to the interview, still didn't really have a clue what they did. Somehow managed to blag my way through the interview and do the 12-week program with First Capital Cashflow, which at the time was the parent company of Patient Plan Direct. So you asked me about
right.
That's how I ended up then becoming involved in Patient Plan Direct, what seems like quite a long time ago now.
So when was that, Simon?
That would have been almost probably, God, how long would that be? 10 plus years ago now.
Wow.
I think. Yeah.
And then you stayed there and you became commercial director of Patient Plan Direct. But then you left the organisation. Was that quite often people just stay in organisations and they just keep moving and they move up? and they often stay within that organisation because it feels comfortable, inertia, lots of different reasons. Did you take a conscious decision to leave to build your skills with a view to kind of boomeranging back into the organisation, or wasn't it as kind of premeditated? I think of somebody like Ben Francis, who obviously started Gymshark, and he started it from his lounge in his mum's house, but he then decided to leave the business to get experience elsewhere, and now he's back in that business. Was that in your thinking, or didn't it work like that?
I'd love to admit it was as strategically planned as that, Andy, but absolutely no, it was. I was just. I have a great relationship. Well, obviously, I've come back. I had a great relationship with the guys at First Capital Cashflow and Patient Plan Direct. But I was just super conscious that I'd effectively come out of university and not really had exposure to anything other than that. And I'd just got this itch about, just doing something a little bit different. And then my partner, her family is on the Isle of Man. And she'd always expressed an interest in, going and giving it a whirl over there. So an opportunity came up for her, and that sort of gave me an excuse to, make that move really, but leave on very, very good terms. And
was that pre-COVID, Simon?
It was, yeah. So this was in and around would have been sort of September, October time, 2019. Right. So moved to the island then, and then obviously the world locked down a few months later.
The only reason I was saying was it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because in a way, because at that point in time we weren't all Zooming or Teamsing or whatever, the physical relocation to the Isle of Man sort of put a stop, almost created that natural divide, didn't it? Whereas in a way, if it had probably been during COVID, people would have said, "Oh, well, you can still keep running it from the Isle of Man because we could." It's really fascinating that COVID in a way was that delineator, and fortunately before, so therefore moving physically gave you the chance. And also, those of you who don't know Simon, and we know Simon reasonably well, but for any accountants that are out there, I do apologise, but I think, Simon, you are too interesting and fun to be an accountant. So I think you would be lost in accountancy. Any accountants watching, I do apologise for that, but you do have a bit of a stereotype of me.
So you left Patient Plan Direct, but you stayed in dentistry, didn't you? Because didn't you move into the world of PR for a bit?
Well, I did. So I actually moved completely out of dentistry for a short period of time. So I went to a trust and corporate service provider. So it's a huge industry out on the Isle of Man, and I worked for an organisation that was in that space, and their client base was predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa and primarily Zimbabwe. And they brought me in to try and, so they've got their regulated business, but then they also, they'd got some ideas around some other business ventures that they wanted to sort of pursue. So I got involved in that. So the main thing I was doing is I set up a structure with, so Zimbabwe export flowers into Europe. And cut a long story short, the Zimbabwean farmers tend to get ripped off. So we sort of set up a trading structure in the Isle of Man to negotiate with Europe. And so essentially went into selling flowers for a little while.
So almost a bit like tradecraft or something, that sort of thing. We'll sell your coffee at decent prices.
Yeah. So got to go out to Zimbabwe, which was pretty cool. And then COVID hit. Things changed. A lot of their client base were in just sectors that just got hit really, really hard and ended up getting made redundant. And then got talking with Gemma at Barker PR, who I can't speak highly of enough. For anybody who's out there who needs PR in the dental industry, Gemma is absolutely
we know
amazing.
Gemma. Well, she's nice, isn't she?
Yeah, she's lovely to go with, been brilliant at her job as well. And got chatting with her. She'd done some work with Patient Plan Direct in the past, and went and worked with Gemma for a few months, and then fast forward again another few months, and the opportunity arose at Patient Plan Direct, and
you're back.
I'm back. Yeah.
So what's the scope of your role now? You're MD of the business, but what does that encompass?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still a little bit of everything. In that, we're still a small. We've been around now for 15 years, so we're very much an established organisation. But still a small team, still a personable service, and I think that is one thing. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. So predominantly the sales and marketing side of the business, and I think. Previously when I was involved and we were still perhaps evolving our processes and our approach, and quite honestly just getting to grips with dentistry. And what I mean by that is that Patient Plan Direct, back at the beginning of its when it came to fruition, was a subsidiary of a parent company. And I would say perhaps only in the last 7 or 8 years, when it's been a standalone company in its own right, have we really sort of pressed forward and now really sort of developed, I believe, a product and a service that's a great fit for dental practices versus some of the other plan providers out there in the market.
Yeah. We obviously value dental practices. So over the last couple of years, we've seen an increased number of practices committing to plans of different sorts because the regularity of cash flow that it provides. Within your business, have you seen, I suppose there's probably a double barrel question, have you seen more people coming to you that want to introduce a plan that they didn't have before because they can see the same benefit of having that regularity of income? And are you also seeing people who are with you increasing the number of patients that are coming on? Because obviously for my part, you see independent fee per item private practices, that can be quite lumpy. You can have good months and not so good months. But also I'm thinking of people that have got NHS contracts who maybe in the future not looking to stay committed to the NHS to the extent they are, and we're looking to transition patients onto a plan-based
especially
service.
After COVID.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, there's lots of questions in there, but you kind of get the gist in terms
of
has it affected your business?
The answer's yes. So I think the big thing for us, and I hear on the grapevine it was the same for the other plan providers as well, is that it was a scary time when COVID hit and when dental practices shut as to our patients going to commit and carry on with their plan, and how long a practice is not going to be able to be accessed for. But generally speaking, patients stayed loyal, and I think that they bought into the concept of what a plan represents, and not just the sort of financial benefit of a plan for a patient and a practice, but also the sort of health benefits as well.
Can I just ask a quick question there, Simon? Can I ask a quick question? Because anecdotally, we would have said that we saw very little patient attrition during those periods, that you didn't have much cancellation. But that, I'm assuming that would be your experience of it, was it?
Exactly, yeah, exactly that. It was surprisingly positive on that front, which was a great thing for all parties involved. I think equally there has been an increase now in practices. Our existing client base, if they are perhaps a mixed practice, are more focused on trying to get more patients on plan because of that recurring revenue that it creates. And I'm sure many dentists would have slept a lot easier at night knowing that there is a plan base of patients definitely creating that recurring income rather than revenue just cutting off overnight. I also believe as well, off the back of the pandemic, that perhaps society and consumers in general are more health aware and more committed to investing in their health, which sort of adds to the mix of plan growth. And to answer your question about the NHS, Andy, yeah, absolutely. And that's something we've been working on really hard the last few months, is really polishing up on the very structured approach that we take to supporting a practice through that transition. So the sort of tools, the technology, the team that we've built to take a practice from, I don't know where I'm going here, do I want to stay in the NHS, to exploring the various options of that transition. and plugging the numbers and doing the viability and acid tests to ensure that what does a good conversion look like? What are my options? What happens if this goes wrong? And getting the team engagement involved and the whole training and patient communication that goes around that. We've done a lot of work around that, purely based on the demand. I don't think it's any secret that there, you see the stats out there. There are so many dentists that are leaving or reducing the reliance on the NHS currently, or planning to do so, in the near future. And then, it makes sense for us to focus our attention
and
on that.
Has COVID changed the sort of practice that you work with in any shape or form? Are they bigger, smaller? Are they predominantly NHS practices that are looking to convert? Has there been a distinct change?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes. There's we're dealing with more. So our business predominantly has been built on practices either launching a plan for the first time, or practices that have got an existing plan base with another plan provider and looking to cut costs. And in moving to us as a low-cost plan provider, they achieve that. We still are taking on that business. But also now we're dealing with so many more mixed and NHS practices that are looking to make that transition.
Because I think when we met, one of the things that surprised me was how quickly it can all go through. It was that I was sort of imagining it was quite a long run up, but in reality, it's not as long as I think people perceive it to be.
Is this on the NHS conversion side of things? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think the key to a successful conversion is just in the planning. And just making sure that there's a really clear idea of where we're trying to get to, making sure the team are all clear on what's happening, why and when, clear communication to patients. But in terms of then sort of handing the contract back and making the transition, it is depending on the way that you manage things, typically it's can be as little as a 3-month process.
And I guess for many practices, they're looking at it because there's inevitably changes coming down the line in relation to NHS dentistry around delivery volumes, how it's going to be centrally funded by government, changing patient behaviour. I think COVID's affected way patients change and how they access dentistry. What are your predictions for what the future of NHS dentistry could look like? Do you think it will get back to the way it was pre-COVID, or do you think we're moving into a cycle where people will just going forward access dentistry in a different way than they did from sort of early 2020?
Such a good question, and I think
the question after this is, can I have your lottery numbers? Because if you know the answer to it, you're a wise man.
If I'm on it, I'm sure there is a plan in place in terms of what perhaps contract reform. Well, there are plans in place in terms of what contract reform may look like, and when that may come to fruition, but. I would suspect, if it's anything to go by with some of the stats that we see coming out. So if you look at the stats around, how many dentists are either leaving or planning to leave, how heavily, there's no secret. Our main competitors are Practice Plan and Dentplan. You pick up any dental magazine and look how hard they are promoting. Are you, thinking of leaving the NHS, a brighter future in private dentistry? It's that they're doing that for a reason, because there's such high demand there. So I think the next 12 months are going to be so interesting in terms of what that rate of dentists switching to private looks like. I think that will have a huge impact on what reform looks like and
what's left to be
what is actually viable.
Do you on the business that you do, especially post-COVID, is there geographical variances? Is there's there's more going on in the northwest or Wales or whatever it might be, or does it not really sort of go that way? Yeah,
interesting. I mean, at the minute, perhaps there's a little bit more going on in Wales, and I think that's just purely because they announced the sort of the contract changes that kicked in from April a little sooner than in England. So perhaps England's just lagging behind a little bit in terms of people just assessing their options and thinking what they want to do.
Interesting.
But aside from that, it's a pretty even split. We're getting inquiries from Cornwall through to Scotland and everywhere in between.
Oh wow!
Cynthia, we talked to a dentist earlier on today, and he was saying that he's expecting most dentists to be handing back a proportion or not delivering a proportion of their NHS contract at the moment. So there's going to be clawbacks all over the place. And I do wonder, because on the private side, lots of practices have done particularly well. They may not actually have the capacity, as in surgery capacity, to continue delivering their NHS contract because their private fees have grown so well.
Resource in terms of dentists.
Yeah.
Yet again, we're talking to someone else with and it seems to be a very poor secret that the fact of a lot of the newer dentists don't want to work either in the NHS or definitely don't want to work more than 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point about capacity, in that, I think last year, and when we touched on just before about there was a drive from practices to add more patients to plan. Obviously, you can only sort of add so many really to particularly, with a membership or maintenance plan where you're just delivering exams and hygiene. You don't want to take up too much of your time doing that and not allowing any time to actually then facilitate treatment, which can yield sort of higher income.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I think I would suspect this year, in terms of our existing base of clients, the how many patients they add is likely to be less than 2021.
And do you have any sense that practices are actually growing their patient numbers, which leads to more patients being on a plan? Or is it a diversion business, in that these are patients who are either using NHS services or purchasing their dentistry privately that are migrating from that as a payment model onto plan? Because we have a thing that we're not sure that actually plan-based patient numbers have significantly grown over the past few years. It's more just, the same numbers of patients are being moved around in a different way. I was just interested to know whether your experience was that the actual numbers of patients are growing, or whether they're just changing how they fund it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of internally within a practice, I'm sure that, if you take a base of plan patients that are either private or NHS, I think what you were saying there, that perhaps more are going to private and onto a plan is right. In terms of, are there more plan patients as a whole currently? I would absolutely. Just purely from the appetite of practices looking to convert from NHS to private.
Just got to change in tack slightly. On advice, everyone talks about good advice, and there's no shortage of people keen to give their 2 pennies worth. What's the worst bit of advice you've ever had?
Oh.
Because we do, don't we? We always talk about good advice, and we share good advice all the time.
Probably thinking back to going back to my university days and the course that I chose. Just do something you enjoy. Do something you enjoy. It's not always, and maybe you can carry that through life. If we all did something we absolutely enjoyed, then it'd be a very interesting world. So I think you've got to.
That's that ikigai thing, isn't it? Have you heard that ikigai thing, where if you do something you love, something that makes you money, something people need, you kind of get to that thing where you're doing what's important. And I think, in a kind of reverse way, I think it is great advice to find something you enjoy, because it then doesn't feel like work, does it? I think we're all very fortunate in what we do, that we kind of don't necessarily feel like on most days it is work. It's just enjoyable what we do.
I'm just trying to think, is there a degree on wine tasting for 3 years?
I'm sure there is.
Couldn't at one time you could do a degree in Elvis or something?
Yeah. Do you see the landscape changing much in dentistry going forward? There's obviously a recruitment issue at the moment generally that's hitting dentistry, but what's your take on where dentistry is heading in the future in terms of what that profession is going to look like?
I think it's again, not to sound like a broken record, but I think this year and just that transition from dentists just thinking, unfortunately, the NHS system is just no longer commercially viable, then it's just going to be such a drive towards private dentistry, and then the impact that has on what a reform looks like, how the government fund NHS dentistry moving forward. It'll just be really interesting to see how that plays out in the coming months or coming years. And I think, that has been, another frustration of dentists for so long, is that how long is it now since we've been waiting for a contract reform from the UDA system? It seems like an eternity, and still I think a lot of uncertainty around when and what that's going to look like.
No, I agree. It's been really interesting, Simon, to get your take on it.
It's a very different view, isn't it? It's a different slant, because you're not from our side or a dentist. You're sort of looking at it from a commerciality of a plan.
That's right. Yeah, but actually, it's a really important, integral part of dentistry, because going forward, there will be more and more patients wanting to access dentistry through a private channel of some sort or other, and having access to a payment mechanism as a practice and as a practice owner is really important. So to get those insights is really useful.
And people should review. I think that's the thing that I always think is, just because you've been with one plan provider, then maybe they should review what they've got, because some of the figures talking to Simon, not being a PPD advert, but the answer is you should definitely consider what you've got. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think on that point, Chris, and a huge thing for us, and thinking back to the whole, why did Patient Plan Direct come to market in the first place? It was a subsidiary of a payments bureau, predominantly providing direct debit processing solutions for corporate entities, public sector, right through to the sort of SME market. And in the world of direct debits, not to get too technical, but there's a facility called the bulk change process, whereby if a bunch of direct debits with one provider wants to move across to another provider, there's a banking facility to make that an easy process. You need to write to the in this instance the patient, to advise them of what's happening and when, and then the whole transfer of the direct debit happens in the background. And Patient Plan Direct very much came to market as a cost-saving proposition, with that facility in mind, thinking that if a practice wanted to switch from a competitor provider to us, then they could do so with ease, because there's a specific functionality in place to achieve that. And for many years, and it's been the bane of our lives, that other providers just haven't played ball with that process until the back end of last year, when finally the regulators got a grip on things, and now all plan providers have signed up. They're now accredited facilities management providers in the world of direct debits, which in layman's terms means that if a practice wants to, let's say they've got 1,000 patients with another plan provider, and they can save, and as you say, Chris, it's tens of thousands of pounds in some instances.
I just think it's one of those things. As us, as I say, we're not doing a PPD advert, but we countenance to people. They should review. It's about getting value for money. You should review your plan provider. You should review your credit card provider. You should review your banking provider. Because ultimately people get stuck in this sort of rut. We even say it with Frank Taylor Associates. By all means, go and find another valuation. It's about value for money and what you get done. It's I think it's one of those things that people should just look at, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's come at a great time for us, even though it's been 14 years in the waiting. But because we've been around that time now, I feel like our team, our technology, and our whole proposition, and how we can support a practice to really achieve their plan objectives is as good as it's ever been. So if you can get everything you need and it costs you a lot less than another provider, then absolutely, Chris, all we ask practices to do is just take that time to, it should be just a regular good business practice to just review your service providers and think, well, am I getting value here? Explore other options.
And value for money.
If the provider you're working with is doing a great job, then brilliant. And in many cases that will be the case, but for some it won't be. So
brilliant.
Cheers, Simon. That's great. It's really good to get kind of sort of under the engine of what goes on in the business, which is good. We always wrap up in the same way. We always ask our guests the two same questions at the end. And the first one we've got for you is, if you could be the fly on a wall with somebody in a certain situation, where would that be? When would it be? Who would you be with?
Yeah, so I did think about, I was going to go political on this, but I thought always best to steer away from that if you can. So I'm going to go, I couldn't decide between two, so I'm going to mention them both if that's all right. They are both sports orientated.
Okay.
I've mentioned I'm big into my sports. So the first one would have been the 2012 Ryder Cup, the Miracle in Medina.
Oh, yeah.
So this is when the European team were way behind the Americans going into the last day, and I'd have just loved to be in a fly on the wall in sort of the team locker room before they went out, and then also just one afterwards, and just to see that whole sort of journey and the celebrations afterwards.
The jubilation at the end, yeah.
Probably like Real Madrid last night, for those of you, that will date the podcast a bit, watching that Champions League.
It would.
God, yeah, that was some game. Which leads me on to actually, Chris, and I know this will relate to you both big football fans. The other one would have been the 2000, I think it was 2005 Champions League final, Liverpool AC Milan.
Ah, yeah.
Again, 3-0 down at half time, to be a fly on the wall in the dressing room at half time, and then what they must have felt like afterwards to come back from that was just such an amazing game.
Yeah. Those kind of triumphs when it's all against you are always great stories, aren't they? When you're you're either the underdog or you're on your last legs, and somehow you manage to sort of turn it around. Yeah. No, they're great ones. And then our last one is, if you could meet someone, who would you like to meet if you were given the opportunity?
Yeah, so a guy called James Clear. Have you heard of him? He wrote
Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits, and he has I think it's a weekly newsletter called 321, which is sort of 3 insightful tips from him, 2 quotes from people to get you thinking about things, and then a question. And I've probably subscribed to that for a good few years now, and look forward to it every week. If you've not signed up to it, highly recommend it. Very, very thought-provoking, and really interesting guy to just sort of just highlight just how important habit and focus is. And it's just, I think that is such a big part of success in any business, is just having that discipline, focus, and habits of doing the right things as well. Of course, that's the other key to success. Otherwise, if you're not focusing on the right things, then you're obviously not going to get to where you want to be. But really interesting guy.
Brilliant, Simon. That's absolutely wonderful.
That's fabulous.
That's really good, really good. Well, go on, we'll let you go, because there's probably a golf course waiting for you somewhere. But no, we really, really appreciate your time today. It's been really good to catch up.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you having me on, and all the best for the rest of 2022.
Look after yourself. Cheers, Simon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.